My biggest film journey had just begun. I walked for almost 30 minutes to find the perfect spot. I set up the tripod, got the camera ready, nailed the focus and exposure, hit record, and then... In this video, I'll share 10 biggest mistakes that I made as a beginner, so you can avoid them and get better faster. The first mistake? Using zoom. All the time. Picture this, you've just bought your dream camera or lens. You take it out to the field, start filming, and you're blown away by how good the zoom looks. Compared to your phone, it's on another level. Of course you're going to zoom on every shot, that's exactly what I did first. But pretty quickly I realized about 80% of my early footage was just me zooming in. Instead, try thinking of your zoom lens as a set of prime lenses. Pick a focal length, compose your shot, and stick with it. Look at these two examples. In the first, I'm zooming throughout the whole clip. In the second, I've cut between several shots at different focal lengths. The second version instantly feels more cinematic. There's still a place for a quick zoom, but use it as a spice and not the main ingredient. And speaking of composition, my next mistake came from treating filmmaking exactly like photography. Let's head to Iceland, to the famous black sand beach Reynisfjara. When I first started, I'd see an incredible location, like this beach, and just capture it as if I was taking a single image. The result? Beautiful, but completely random shots that felt more like a slideshow than a film. What changed everything was realizing you need to think in sequences. Film the same place from different angles, distances and perspectives. Include details. On a beach, not just big waves, but also water slowly flowing onto the sand or foam washing over rocks. Your mission is to make the viewer feel the place the way that you do. If you feel inspired, calm, or maybe uncomfortably hot, try to think what makes you feel this way. Then capture it, and that's what makes the audience feel it too. And once I started thinking in sequences, I ran into a new problem. If there's one thing that made me throw away the most footage from Iceland, it has to be panning too fast. The problem is, you can always speed up a pan that's a bit too slow, but you can't fix a shot that's uncomfortably blurry or hard to watch, especially if it was meant to be a scenic panorama. Here's the trick. Practice patience. Record your pans much slower than you think you should, and if you're zoomed in, slow down even more. One extra tip. You can also shoot pans in a higher frame rate, for example 60 FPS, and later slow it down to 24 in post. It's not always necessary, but gives you much more fault-proof footage. And the worst part? On the small camera screen, those pans actually looked fine. And that leads me to the next mistake. That one's quick, but it's worth mentioning. Don't completely trust your camera monitor. It can hide small details that you'll only notice when you're back from your trip. If you're filming for a few days and have access to a computer or even a TV with HDMI in your hotel, check your footage on a bigger screen. You might catch mistakes early before you repeat them for the rest of your shoot. Sometimes you can be making the same error over and over, like panning too fast, and it's just not obvious on a small preview screen. And before we move on to the next mistake, if you're enjoying these tips, consider subscribing. It's the easiest way to not miss other travel films and behind-the-scenes videos. Okay, so here's a gear-related mistake that made a lot of my footage look flat and lifeless. It's not using the ND filters. You've probably heard that for cinematic motion you want to keep your shutter speed consistent. Usually double your frame rate, so 160 for 30 fps and 148 for 24 fps. But what happens when it's bright and your image is overexposed? My beginner move? Just crank the aperture to the smallest opening possible. On my BMP-CC 4K with micro four thirds sensor, that was even f22. It seemed like the obvious choice, but it killed the look of my shots. At f22 everything looked flat and the sharpness went down because of diffraction. This shot was taken at f22 without an ND filter. And here's the same scene at f4 with an ND filter. The depth, the separation and the overall feel are completely different. Think of ND filters as sunglasses for your lens. They're one of the most important pieces of gear for controlling exposure without sacrificing your creative look. Now let's talk post-production, specifically color grading. One of my early mistakes was to always try to use full dynamic range of image. When you start learning color grading, you often hear stretch your image so the scopes go from pure black to pure white. And yes, sometimes that works. But if your scene is naturally dark with only dim or soft light, forcing the shadows all the way down and the highlights all the way up can make it look unnatural. Here's an example. The original shot was taken on a cloudy day with no strong highlights. When I forced the waveform to touch the top and bottom, the scene suddenly felt fake and overprocessed. Instead, think about what your scene should feel like and use your scopes as a guide, not a rulebook. Sometimes it's much better to leave the highlights soft and shadows lifted if that's what makes the scene feel real. I've actually made a full beginner's guide to color grading in DaVinci Resolve. I'll link it here and in the description below. It's a good place to start if you want your colors to look cinematic without overdoing it. The next mistake is something that can ruin both your plans and your film: not giving yourself enough time to shoot. If you want your film to feel emotional and immersive, you need to actually experience the places you're showing, not just run from the car to the viewpoint, grab a quick shot and leave. Always plan to stay longer than you think you need, much longer than you would as a regular tourist. You might have to wait for the wind to move the tree just right, or for the bird to flap its wings, and trust me, sometimes it takes a lot of time. When you rush, you risk missing the most magical moments. This is especially true when filming wildlife. Patience can be the difference between an average shot and your film's highlight. And while waiting for that one special moment, don't forget to keep recording. This one is the simplest but most painful mistake that I made: not letting the camera roll long enough. It works both ways, starting to record too late and stopping too early. If you wait until the exact moment something happens to hit record, chances are you'll miss the beginning of it. And if you cut too soon after it happens, you might lose the perfect ending for your shot. When filming something fleeting, like wildlife, waves, or even sudden light changes, your camera should already be rolling before you expect the action. And after it happens, let it keep rolling for a few seconds, even if it feels unnatural to do so. I learned this the hard way in Latrabjarg, filming puffins. I spent over an hour capturing them in that location, which gave me so much material to work with. In the edit, I could choose only the most magical moments, and even matching the pacing to the music, something I showed step by step in my editing workflow video, so be sure to check it out. While recording, don't try to be the filmmaker and the editor at the same time. Your only job is to capture as much as possible, and later you'll have time to cut out the boring parts. And those extra seconds at the start and end of your clips are the gift to your future editing self. Sometimes the perfect timing in your film comes from the moment you almost didn't record. But even if you get the timing right, there's still one thing that can ruin your footage. A mistake so defining that it shaped the way how I film, the name of this channel, and the motto I follow to this day. This mistake is trying too hard to make your scenes more interesting. When I first started, I couldn't resist adding movement to almost every shot. Zooming, panning, tilting, racking focus. If the camera wasn't moving, I felt like the scene would be boring. But after countless hours of editing, I realized something surprising. My strongest, most captivating scenes were the ones where the subject or the landscape carried the scene, not the motion of the camera. Even without dramatic movement, nature is never truly still. The sway of grass, the shifting clouds, the subtle play of light. These tiny organic motions are what makes the scene alive, and they don't need me to help them. Learning to trust that was a turning point, and it's why from that moment on I embraced a simple truth. Best thing you can do is let your films be shot by reality. And finally, what's the story behind all that running between continents? This mistake was small but painfully frustrating. After 30 minutes of walking, I finally found the perfect spot. I set up the tripod, framed the shot, nailed the focus and exposure, and hit record. Nothing happened. Turns out, I'd forgotten this: the SSD cable. Without it, my entire setup, the camera, lens, tripod, was just useless pile of junk. Luckily, I could leave all the gear with my wife and sprint all the way back to the car. To make matters worse, this mistake cost us all the time buffer we had to avoid the crowds of tourists, and in a place like Iceland's Golden Circle, that's priceless. So before you leave your home, hotel or car, double check everything. It takes just 30 seconds and can save you a whole day of shooting. If you want to see the full list of gear that I pack for trips like this, I've made a full dedicated video about my camera setup. I'll link it here and in the description below. And those were the 10 biggest mistakes I made as a beginner filmmaker. Hopefully they'll save you from losing shots, losing time and losing your breath running between continents. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing so you don't miss another tips, behind the scenes and cinematic travel films I'm working on. And if you would like to keep watching right now, here's a film that I think you'll enjoy next. And remember, let your films be shot by reality.